that are going to make the foundation of our email templates in our program. So one of the most important things that we can do that's going to have the highest impact is simplifying email design. And there's a number of reasons why this is really important. And one of them is we have a lot of information on how contacts and subscribers are interacting with our email. We know that a large portion of those contacts are only reading or skimming or abandoning our emails when they see that. And that means that they're spending 8 seconds or less on our emails. So we need to kind of catch them as soon as they open that email and engage them with some really cool visuals. Email attention span is reportedly about 13 seconds on average. So you have to think about that kind of a limited window to really draw in your subscribers. And some great stats here. So how do we do that? We know that our brains process images 60,000 times faster than text. So with that information, we know, hey, how are we going to structure these emails to be instantly engageable, something that contacts are going to want to continue to spend some time with, more than that 8 seconds, more than that 13 seconds. So really important thing to start off with here is let's keep the copy short and sweet and make sure that it's instantly visually interesting. And this is a great example of that. If you look, they have that product that they're launching front and center. They have a great CTA, really short copy, and just this really interesting GIF there at the bottom. So in keeping with simplifying our email design, let's keep it clean. And what that means is establishing some visual hierarchy and good text to image ratio. And that is arranging the elements in your email in order of importance. This example here is a really great example of that. So, we have some really awesome images. The elements are stacked in order of importance here. The headline is prominent, it's very distinguishable, but it's not a misuse of that creative real estate. It's keeping headlines on 2 lines or less, best practice. Keep text on a simplified background. So this has a lot of white space around it. It makes it easy for you to read, and even the call to action in some of these secondary areas. Utilize that white space so that you can see that text prominently. Directional cues. I love what this email does with directional cues, and it's drawing your eye down to the areas that we want you to focus on. So this first CTA is really prominent, and the way that these arrows work, it draws your eye there immediately. And then from there, they're pointing at additional CTAs. So one of the things that we do struggle with email creatives is how do we avoid fatigue? And that's a real thing with our subscribers. They're getting a ton of emails, not just from us, but from a lot of brands. So we want to avoid that email fatigue. One of the easiest things that we can do, let's look at that framework underneath your creative. So vary your layout, rotate that design layout to avoid using that same framework over and over again. And that just makes that email feel different every time. So just a pro tip for that, create at least 4 different wireframes. And I've given examples of some wireframes that we have here. So maybe you are looking at something with a really great prominent image for your hero, headline and CTA, or you're testing a hero image next to your headline and CTA, or perhaps you're looking at kind of a promotional email where that hero is the main promo, that main promo text, that's exactly where we want to draw our eye. We just want to have a bunch of these wireframes as a library, because when we build on top of those from there using color, typography, imagery, it makes it seem like the breadth of our library is much wider than it is. Master templates are also really great because once you get them coded, tested, optimized, it makes it really easy to build emails faster and with less errors moving forward. So now that we've talked about varying your layout, let's look at what's going on top of that layout, varying your creative. We want this to look visually interesting every time somebody opens an email. And one way to do that is just to test a mix of design elements for your hero. So illustrated hero, lifestyle images, typography, product highlights, GIFs. And GIFs are really great, or any type of animation is really great in email because it is designed to grab your attention. Just a couple quick tips on those for if you're using GIFs a lot. Be mindful of the file size. So this should be 1 megabyte or smaller, and that's just to help with loading. Avoid too many of those animation elements. When we're talking about grabbing your attention, sometimes when you have way too many of that animation elements, it gets a little frenetic, and you reach a point of diminishing returns where it's more distracting than attention grabbing. Avoid reusing heroes. So there is something to be said about using a similar hero over a long tail campaign, but if a subscriber is opening your email and feeling like they're seeing the same creative that they've seen before, they may not take the time to see that it is a different offer. So really important to avoid using that hero so you're not failing the glance test. And then another element to consider is video. Video is expected to make up 80% of content on the internet, and we know it's a huge boom and it's not going away. It can increase click rate 200 to 300%, but just a couple things to keep in mind with video as well. So best practice is for you to host your video on your website. If not on your website, then on your own YouTube channel, but make it very easy for subscribers to get back to your website, contacts to get back to what we want them to do. If we make it difficult, if it's hosted on another site, then you're really losing that traffic and that path to engagement that we're working so hard to curate. This example is just an example of a really fun GIF. And then talking here about Outlook, another limitation here, doesn't support animation. So you want to make sure that first frame communicates your message. So we have that static headline here, and then a really cool attention-grabbing GIF that is showing a lot of the different products. And then we have a couple CTAs there as far as what we want them to do. And speaking of CTAs, we'll talk through a couple best practices there. So this is the journey that we want our contact to take. This is whether it's for an e-com company, whether it's making a purchase or giving us their information for a lead generation campaign. This is what is going to get them to that point. So just a couple best practice elements on that. CTAs should be above the fold. And again, that is going back to that visual hierarchy, ordering our email in the level of importance. Use multiple CTAs where it makes sense. Now, we don't want to just litter our email with different CTAs because, again, that can be distracting. But if you have a lot of different offers or secondary offers, or if it's a longer form email, make sure that you have CTAs in there. Every email creative should have at least one CTA. And that's just because if our contacts get used to not engaging with our email in any way, not clicking on our email, then you will see an overall click rate decline even when you start reintroducing those CTAs. So just have, even if it's driving them to an FAQ page, driving them to a social page, make sure that you have something in there. Buttons should be large for ease of use on mobile. Make sure the colors stand out, make sure it's really easy to get to. And then here's a really fun one, but really high impact. Don't be afraid to change up your CTA text. So I know a lot of us use shop now, buy now, as we're trying to direct them to a product page, but there's some other text that you could use, maybe a little bit more specific. And it's a really great thing to test because it can be high impact. And we'll chat about that in just a second. But looking at some of these examples, again, we have those prominent CTAs at the top, and then maybe clicking to some other categories. And they also have some really great subcategory sections that we'll talk about here in just a second as well. So that's that additional engagement point too. Outside of your primary CTA, let's look at navigation with multiple end locations. So that can be a header navigation, that can be footer navigation. And while it might seem like, hey, this is a little bit low impact, header and footer navigation can actually account for as high as 25% of your total clicks. And that's especially the case if you're highlighting a specific promotion or a specific product. So just a pro tip for that. If you do decide to implement using different navigation items, whether it's in your header or your footer, make sure to track that and see how it's performing. So here to the right, you see we've used a heat map, and a lot of ESPs have this very easily available to you, or you can do link tracking. And if your ESP doesn't offer that, you can do that by UTM tagging your links. But this gives us a visual representation of where people are clicking on our emails so that we can go ahead and optimize for that. And as you're seeing at the top, header navigation and bottom, in this email making up 27%. So definitely something important to have there, especially if your subscriber is taking the time to go ahead and spend more than that 8 seconds on your email, but they're not really engaged in that top offer. Let's give them some other opportunities to get back to our site. Incorporate sub banners with CTAs there, and that can increase our clicking conversions. And it's a really great place for us to put some of these extra value ads. So do you have a charity program? Do you have free shipping or easy returns, a money back guarantee? That's a really great place to use that information as trust building, and also another place that contacts can engage in. And then include those social channels and referral programs. We spend a lot of time building up all of these other awesome aspects of our program. Let's make sure that we highlight them. So just jumping into a couple branding do's and don'ts. So branding is so important for us because that is like the representation of our relationship with our subscriber base. So it's really important that we keep that consistent. One of the best ways of doing that is maintaining an updated brand guidelines and keeping that consistent across email to email, the journey from email to website, and then across all of your channels so that your contact can easily identify who you are when they're engaging with you in different channels. And just a little stat here, again, of how important it is to integrate email tightly with other channels. It really adds to that overall user experience, and brands are really paying attention to that and spending a lot of time working on it. Do consider user experience, and to that end, we can put together a beautiful email. And if a user then, they're excited by this email, they're excited by the offer, and they click through and end up on your website, and it's a completely different experience visually where they land, you will see a high bounce rate. So what we want to avoid is that discontinuity of user experience. So just how can you tell if this is happening for you? It's a pro tip. Go to check out your analytics. Review your site bounce rate for the email channel specifically. Is it higher than the bounce rate for other channels? Is it higher than your average? If that's the case, then there could be a disconnect happening between your creative and where we're directing people and where they're landing. And then talking about creative, again, don't discount design shock. So one of the things that gets really exciting for a program is when you reach that level where it's time to elevate your brand. A lot of brands want to do that quickly. They want to roll out a brand new design, but you've also spent all of this really great time developing that relationship with your contacts, visually with your creatives, and you want to make sure that you aren't discounting all of that. So what we normally would recommend is kind of a general, like a slow gradual rollout for that. And when you're testing it, test it with a new cohort. So test it with new users who haven't spent a lot of time interacting with the old brand. And that's a really great way for you to grab information on how that new creative is performing, how it's, how to optimize that before you roll it out to your full audience. But don't forget about design shock, because sometimes when brands roll out new creatives and they see, whoa, our engagement rates are dropping, they'll automatically just cut that, and it's not necessarily an indication of the creative. It can be an indication of the user experience again. So personalization, not a lot of brands use this as a fundamental, but it certainly is one. It's one of a definite principle for all email programs. And it's indication here, 40.7% of marketers placed that as the #1 area for 2019, and focusing more on personalization and dynamic content. So what does that mean? How do we get started if you're not already personalizing your creative? The first thing that you need to do is inventory your data. So again, another tip, most brands have enough information to know where the contact falls in the funnel. That means whether they've purchased before, whether they're a new contact, a repeat purchaser. Basic demographic, location data, geo-IP data, past browse, and purchase behavior, and you can use that to serve them a really great one-on-one experience. Utilize product recommendations. So a lot of ESPs offer this as a free tool, or you can look into getting some add-on tools in order to do that. But you can use product recommendations and pull in dynamically products that customers are interested in based off of some past browse behavior, past purchase behavior. And just looking at a couple of these examples, so here is an example again, pulling in based off of a past browse behavior, showing them an email with a product that they may be really interested in. And here's another one of just a brand building element. So what do we have? We know the date that somebody made a purchase, their first purchase a year ago. Wouldn't it be a great idea for us to try to engage them further with the brand by giving them a gift or just calling out how much we appreciate that relationship? So once you have all of that, once you've inventoried the data and what you can use, start segmenting. Marketers who use segmented campaigns note as much as a 760% increase in revenue. That is a huge number that can't be ignored. So start segmenting based off of this information and then serving them creative that calls to some of those aspects, calls to what they are most interested in, things that they have shown past purchase behavior for, browse behavior for. And then if we don't have all of that information, use emails as a way to gather that information. So if you look at this carved example here on the right, they're asking what type of device that person has so that they can then use that information, store it in the ESP, use the information to give creative based off of what device that they selected. And you have a default, so we have this to personal message in case that people don't want to answer that, they don't want to engage with that email, but it's only going to help us gather more information that we can use to show some really great information. And then this item is a module that's just added to a longer form email. So if you look here, this is an item that they've browsed in the past, so they're adding this at the bottom of an email that's actually being blasted out but segmented. And then here, we're new in town. This is an item showcasing where an in-person office would be, and that's using the location that they have, location data that we have on those contacts. So mobile considerations. Really important for us to make sure that we're optimized for mobile, and as most of you know, mobile is not going anywhere. The shift is going more and more year over year to openings happening on mobile devices. In 2018, we know that over 50% of all opens happened on mobile device. So it's really important for us to optimize. And what that means is if an email is served or sent to a contact and it's not formatted for mobile and it's a bad experience, we know that that is going to cause a huge bounce rate off that email, no matter how good that contact is. And in here, likely to be deleted in under 3 seconds in over 70% of the cases. So it's so important for us to make sure that the creative that we are putting in front of our contacts is optimized for mobile and looks beautiful on mobile. Another stat here, conversion rates for mobile traffic are growing quickly year over year, and they're going down for desktop. And that just, again, undercuts the importance of that shift from traditional desktop to mobile. So just a couple requirements for mobile. Assets should be sized at double the typical email width. So a typical email is sized to 600 pixels. So you want all of your images sized to double that. And that's so that it will render clearly on Retina displays. Are you ever looking at your phone and you see an email and it looks a little bit blurry on your phone, but not on desktop? That's the issue. So you want to make sure that you size those images up. Keep your fonts large. Depending on the typeface, the headline font should be a minimum of 22 pixels, and the body font should be 14 pixels or higher. You want to stick to that single column layout, and again, that's optimized for mobile. Keep that copy concise. Rule of thumb is your reader is likely going to scroll through your email 2 times or less. So we know the great thing about mobile scroll is it does help us to support some of these longer form emails now, but we want to make sure that we're using that responsibly. So if you have 2 scrolls or less in your email, make sure, again, that hierarchy is arranging your elements in order of importance. And then test your email across multiple devices. So a pro tip, run that through email rendering software to see how your email displays an inbox across most devices. Otherwise, gather your top opens. So go into your ESP and see how many contacts are opening on Gmail, how many are opening on iPhone, how many are opening on Outlook, and then make sure that your email is optimized for those devices and check on those devices. Now, we know that Gmail and Apple Mail right now make up almost half of all opens, so certainly your emails should always be optimized for those. If you're a B2B company or an organization of that nature, you might see more email opens happening on Outlook, and it's really important to make sure that you keep a close eye on Outlook because it doesn't have some of the support function that some of our other clients have. So just looking at kind of the types of mobile design, mobile friendly versus mobile responsive, and the biggest difference here is mobile friendly that's executed in design. That's making sure that you have that single column layout, large fonts, large buttons, but you're not really doing anything different in code. While you're in mobile responsive, that's happening in code. So you are rearranging some of the elements of your email, stacking things, and that happens based off of device widths within your code. So the one great thing about mobile friendly, it's support across all platforms, mobile responsive, most platforms, but some of those apps, older webmail clients don't support the CSS. A great one again to look at is Outlook for that. And then just considerations for those, you'll have to keep in mind some of the other design elements that you might like using, like background images, might not work with mobile responsive. However, it's a really, really great option for text-heavy emails or newsletters or informative emails or anything with a multi-column layout, because then you can kind of stack that in. Mobile friendly makes it much more easier to use like really highly stylized email designs. Also, if you're a brand that's very, very strict about what fonts you can use, you'll want to default to mobile friendly because mobile responsive will use some of those web safe fonts, email safe fonts that might not necessarily align with your brand. However, Google Fonts is kind of helping us to mitigate that moving forward. So I think we'll see a lot of really great changes there. So just looking at testing to optimize our creative, now that we have these fundamentals in place, how do we level up to an even more sophisticated creative? So at this point, I'm going to pass it back to Persephone for a poll.
Great, thanks, Amy. So let me get that ready for everyone in the audience here. And with this one, how often are you testing? The options available to you are a regularly A/B test, a subject lines, messaging, and sometimes to optimize for engagement. And then our second option, it's valuable, but I don't know what to test. Third option would be it's valuable, but I don't have the tools. Followed by our last option, it's not important to me. So I'll go ahead and leave this poll open for just a couple more seconds. I see that people are still voting, and then I'll go ahead and share and close the results. Alrighty, and huge thank you to everyone that voted. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll for now and then share those results with you guys. Alrighty, and it looks like 44% are regularly A/B testing, followed with 28% it's valuable, but I don't have the tools. 25% it's valuable, but I don't know what to test, and then 3% it's not important to me. So pretty shocking results. I'll give it back to you, Amy.
Thanks, Persephone. So for those contacts that said, I don't know what to test, you're in really good company. So just kind of looking at some of these stats here, 42.9% of respondents don't know what to test. So there are a ton of really high impact tests, starting with some of these creative tests that we're gonna go through that you can use with your email program moving forward. And great to see that a lot of our people who are tuned in today do regularly test. You are above the curve because we see here it's normally about 31% of people regularly testing. So just jumping into a couple best practices. Develop a hypothesis that you're trying to prove. We do this for every test. What are we trying to get? What information are we trying to prove with this particular test? Execute true A/B splits when possible. Make sure those groups are large enough. If you're testing with a small audience, those results may not be conclusive. So we recommend testing with sizes above 10,000 contacts. Test multiple times, and that's because there's a lot going on in the inbox, and there may be external noise. It may be a really heavy send day. There may be something going on. Run any test 1 to 2 times a week over a 3 to 4 week range, and that gives us a good chunk of actionable data. And then workflow tests should run for 2 to 3 weeks or until you reach statistical significance. And we want to make sure that we always have statistical significance with our tests. And then make sure to run them on similar types of sends and segments, again, to avoid that skewed result. And I like to use static groups when I'm testing because that we can really define what that journey has been for those different audiences that way. And just here's a little resource for you all on the different types of testing, when to do it, when not to do it, and what it's best for. So A/B testing is that great 50-50 split that we use for most of our testing. And that gives us really clear takeaway results. Multivariate is going to happen after you're able to get some of those, that low-hanging, high-impact tests done, and then you want to test a couple other things. So maybe you're testing CTA text plus color of CTA. Don't do that unless you've already exhausted all of that really great testing we can do with A/B scenario. Champion versus challenger. So this is, when you might have it going out to a smaller group and then out to the larger group afterwards. Don't test this during a holiday because it could skew the results, especially with timing and things like ISP throttling that we see happening. And then holdout testing is when you're just holding a group and not giving them the experience that everybody else is experiencing. And we wouldn't really recommend it unless you have very, very heavily tested all of the other elements. Use control groups instead. Use a control experience for those contacts. So just want to look at an example of some of these tests and some of these templates that we've been talking about. So here's an example of a template update. And this is a very gradual. So we started here and we wanted to end up here, but we really wanted the stats to inform whether or not that was a good move. So it was a slow and consistent rollout of the change to the creative. So first we could see, okay, this layout is a better layout for us from this original layout, but we're keeping that original branding, so it's not too much of a shock. Then we move to this last creative, which is, an updated branding. It's more fun, it's more youthful, and it's taking some of the takeaways that we learned here as far as how the email should be laid out with the trust icons here versus kind of stacking them in that side by side. And you utilize a new cohort to minimize the effects of design shock for that. So people who are used to seeing an email look like this in their inbox 3 times a week, all of a sudden getting this, it's like, whoa, what's happening? What's happened to the brand? So test using those new groups. Here's a layout test. Love this test. So, there's always the temptation to put as much text as possible, but let's always remember that our main goal is to get them back to that website. So here is one where we have a ton of extra text, whereas here we're being a little bit more vague with some more intrigue, trying to use mystery to get them back to the site. It was run for active customers and non-purchaser groups separately, and there was a 323% lift in click for active customers back to the site, which is huge. And then 123% lift in clicks for non-purchasers. So there's value in both audiences, seeing less text, but still getting the gist of what our messaging is behind. And that's talking again about, simplifying our designs, making it visually interesting, but keeping text short and sweet. Personalized content. So in this example, we used a contact's geographic information to serve them a live banner based off of the weather that was happening in that location at the time. This is definitely some advanced personalization, but really interesting. We saw a 61% lift in conversion rate and a 56% lift in revenue per delivery. So huge impact by showing something personal, something even as small as a message like this, because it's top of mind for contacts. CTA copy. So, here we have that generic copy, which is get yours, which they're using in here. It's a little bit more of a fun brand, so differing from our normal like shop now or buy now. Tested using specific different text for each of these CTAs. So shop parachutes, shop essentials, and saw a 26.23% lift in that click to open rate. So again, even doing something as small as just varying up some of the text in your CTA can have huge impact. And then testing text versus visual. So have a lot of information to get out. This is it's an information heavy email for new partners. In this email, we're separating that text. We're using color blocking, we're using visuals, as opposed to just having that text element there, and saw 143% lift in click to open rate. So just looking forward to a couple design trends that we see coming down the pipeline after you've, revisited your fundamentals, tested and optimized your creative for mobile. What else do we have that we can look to? One of the big things that's coming or has already been launched but is being rolled out on a higher level is Gmail promotions annotations, and it's just kind of a change to the Gmail promo tab. So it bundles the best stuff at the top, and it gives us an opportunity to make it, again, more visual directly in the inbox before people even open your email. So you can show your logo, deal badges, codes, and then an image there. So it just kind of helps you to stand out in the inbox with some of the other brands there. And this is implemented within code, and right now is being supported in the Gmail app and Gmail desktop. AMP for Gmail, this is really exciting. So this is allowing contacts that interact with your email and take that action we want them to take directly in the email. So they don't necessarily have to go to the website. They can click on something within your email and already have an interactive experience right there. So this is rolling out and right now is supported again in Gmail, but some Outlook and Yahoo have also announced support for this moving forward. So really important. And when we're talking about things that are Gmail specific, it is so important for us to optimize for Gmail because we know now that it's the #1 email client that's being used across all demographics. And then another thing that we're seeing is just some cool advanced animation. So more complex GIFs, live content, cinemagraphs, which are a really cool look that we're seeing having a moment right now in design, that embedded video. So we're not having to put them to a hosted web page or back to our website where we have our video, but they can see it right within the email and then click from there, which is very powerful, and some CSS animation elements. And again, some of these will have some support requirements, so just make sure that you research what those requirements are and that it works with the demographic of your particular program. And at that, I'm going to pass it over to Sammy to talk through some other great examples.
Hey guys, thanks so much, Amy. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to go over some design basics. Some of the things Amy actually already covered in great detail. So I'm going to blow through some of those and then we can go over some detailed examples, how to apply them to email design within Klaviyo. So my name is Sammy, and I am a product designer at Klaviyo, part of our support team. So we'll be going again over design basics, template design tips, and actionable takeaways. So just to go over design basics, what I've learned at one of the conferences I attended was reduce the cognitive load, something that Amy touched upon, where we really want to create our emails to be clean, concise. Is it relevant to the email that we're sending out? How long is too long? And who your audience is. Are they people who are opening on desktop or people opening on mobile? So just to go over fonts in general, custom fonts are supported just on a handful of email clients, and what Amy spoke to was you generally want to use web-safe fonts where they render for all email clients just to be consistent. Use a maximum of 2 font faces because any more than that could cause load time within your email, and we just want that to be loading as fast as possible. And then think about responsive font sizes. So again, what Amy was saying, make sure the font sizes aren't too small for your mobile users. So then for colors, we do want to stick to our brand colors. I know there's resources out there that say orange may perform the best, but that's not always the case. You do want to just stick to what your brand guidelines, what they are. And so using for your primary CTAs, you can use a background color for your primary CTA, and then for your secondary CTAs, I recommend maybe adding a border as that bold color rather than doing a background color for it. And also just differentiating between mobile and desktop view. So for mobile users, we want to, who's your audience? Some of our customers try to mirror their layouts between desktop and mobile, meaning that they ideally want to see the same layout, but that doesn't render for scalability for mobile users. Stacking items into one column, as Amy mentioned, is best practice. It's easy for scalability. They can read it easily for mobile users. And we want to make sure that for mobile devices that don't support media queries, which is responsive design, that your template will be easily rendable in those mobile clients. So takeaway here is, again, just one column, responsive font sizes, and keeping it simple and clean. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was text-based versus all image emails. So I understand that branding is super important. So mainly we're thinking about fonts here, but we also want to think about deliverability. So a lot of email clients really appreciate just making sure that you're sending out relevant content to your recipients, and how they can determine that is just by the text within the HTML. So I understand that custom fonts aren't supported in all email clients, so the workaround would be to use an image as your headline, so that way you get your custom font in there. And then for any body copy, you can use live text with your custom font, and then just set a web-safe font to make sure it renders to something that's readable. And we want to make sure for any email clients you're using alt text, just in case they block your images, such as Outlook. And sometimes images could also poorly scale down for mobile users, so just keep in mind the font choices that you're making there. So the takeaway here is use the 80-20 rule, 80% text and 20% images. There are third-party tools you can use to determine that, to kind of value, how much text and images you're using in your email. And again, just making sure you're using alt text on all of your images. And just remember that branding doesn't have to be 100% sacrificed. Just try to find a happy medium between those two. Let me get to click the thing. There you go. Oh. So we're going to go into email types. So we have campaigns, which are more of your one-off sends, and those can include product sales, new product collection announcements, or newsletters. And then your flows are more automated based off of an event trigger or an action that a recipient has taken, such as your abandoned cart flow or welcome series if a person has signed up through a sign-up form, any of those. So first we're going to go into campaigns, and the first example is by Car Keys. Type of email is a blog or informational type of newsletter. While it is long in length, if you look at the content itself, there's a clear headline, short content, and the CTA buttons for the primary have the darker background color, and the second CTAs have a lighter color. The way you can level up this email is by hiding and showing content based on their custom profile property. So you can send emails that are more specific to that user, so you're not displaying all contents within the email. Next example is by Headspace, and this is more of a product sale announcement. What I liked about this is that they give you a clear expiration date at the very top, and it's minimal amount of CTAs where you only have 2 options to click through the website. And how you can level up this email is just simply by swapping out the expiration date with a countdown timer. So within Klaviyo, you can import any custom HTML you'd like, such as a countdown timer within the source of a text block. So you can use any third-party tool, such as Centric, to do that. And the last example for a campaign is by Alit, and this is more of a new product announcement. So this is focused just on this new product. The imagery using a GIF is captivating, and there's one main CTA. And the way you can level up this email is Klaviyo has a team full of data scientists, which we really, really appreciate them. They've created an algorithm to determine who your recipients that may make a future purchase, if they're going to churn. So you can create a segment out of those customers to predict a high value and share those news first. So such as maybe your VIP customers, or they get a sneak peek of a new collection. And now we're going to hop into flows. So flows is just, again, based off of event triggers or an action that a recipient has taken. And the first example is by Beard Brand. So this is an abandoned cart email where someone has added a few things to their cart and they forgot to complete their checkout. Why this works is that it's a standalone logo. There's no extra nav links at the top to distract the user from going to a different landing page on your site. The purpose of abandoned cart email is to complete their checkout, so we want to make sure that they do that and not land on a product page. And again, there's one CTA, but there's 2 chances to click. So if I'm viewing this email on mobile, and for whatever reason, if I don't scroll through the email, I'll be able to click on that first reclaim my cart button and just take me right to my cart. The way you could possibly level up your abandoned cart flow is basing the emails off of different properties. So for example, you could do it based off of the cart value itself. For one email, you could offer free shipping if it's under $100. If not, you can send them just a regular abandoned cart email. Another way you could segment the emails is based off of if they've previously purchased before or their first-time customer, so you can base them off of those specific attributes. And the next example is by Warby Parker, which is one of my favorite brands. I just love getting their emails because they're always clean, to the point. This is based off of their welcome series or welcome flows, so you just sign up right through their newsletter. I liked it because it just introduces all the main categories they have that they offer, and then just a little behind the scenes of what their product is, who they're about, and their company. So how you could essentially level up this email is just by updating their profile property by just applying this to the URL that the user clicks on. So on the front-facing end, it just looks like a regular link, and it will get them to their landing page. But on the back end of Klaviyo, it'll store or update a profile property. So for example, in the Warby Parker example, if a recipient clicks on women's classes, the second email you sent out in their welcome flow, you can specify content based around women's classes. And the last example here is by the brand Misguided. This is an anniversary or birthday type of email flow. What I liked about this is that they use personalized text. So at the bottom, they use the first name tag to display my first name. And they also have a dynamic coupon code that they offered within the email. Again, just simple CTA, quick to click through the site, and I can just make a purchase with my discount code. And how you can level up this email is by automatically applying the coupon code to the CTA button or the discount. It is a lot easier for the recipient to be able to just click through the site without thinking about a long dynamic code. So it just makes it easier to make a purchase from there. And just actionable takeaways, kind of wrapping up what we just went over here. So for design basics, remember that content is key. Stay within your brand guidelines and optimize for both desktop and mobile. And structure layouts based on the type of content or email that you're going to send out. For campaigns, let's just make sure that everything's clear and concise. Creating a sense of urgency. So, you know, if you announce a new collection, maybe add in that it might sell out quickly. Clear and primary, secondary CTA buttons are really important, differentiating those two. For flows, we don't want any distractions. They should be short and sweet, and make broad emails feel personal by using different properties to send more personalized emails. And next level tips, create flows based on predictive analytics. You can collect more information about your customers, and you can show in high dynamic content based on the information that you've collected. And that brings us to the end of, let's see. That brings us to the end of our presentation.
Alrighty, perfect. Thank you for that, Sammy and Amy. So before we did dive into our live Q&A, I just wanted to let the audience know we hope that you enjoyed these insights on what top brands are testing to grow their marketing revenue, whether it's personalization, varying layouts, creative CTAs, or incorporating mobile email tactics into your strategy. It's essential to regularly test, learn, and optimize creative assets to improve the experience for consumers. So with that said, I did want to launch this poll, and I'll leave it open throughout our live Q&A. If you'd like to go ahead and schedule a digital marketing strategy evaluation, let us know. And then with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the Q&A. I have been queuing up a couple questions from the audience, and if anyone has any other ones, just feel free to drop them in the chat box. And then this question is from Alan. He's just looking for some clarification on what does it mean to maintain updated brand guidelines.
Yeah, okay, I'll jump in and take this one for Stephanie. So what that means is you're putting together a document that lays out design elements that your brand can and cannot use. So that might be setting up a Pantone of colors. So here's the hex code of colors that we use. Here's how my logo should be treated every time. It should be treated in a circular way instead of in a square-like treatment. Here are the fonts that we're using. So we're always using Roboto. Don't use this font. Here are the colors that it's okay to use. Here is how and what images you can and cannot use. So you put together kind of a one sheet, and whenever you work with a new agency or anybody that wants to highlight any of your material, you can give them those brand guidelines and then they operate within that. And most companies have kind of a robust library of that set up, but even just having a one-pager helps.
Great, thanks, Amy. And then this next question is from Michael. I think he was referring back to some stats from slide 18. Let's see, why would conversions on desktops be declining? Is there an inverse relationship between desktop and mobile conversions? And if so, what is your take on that?
So I would say it's less about an inverse relationship and more about a behavior shift. So more people are opening on mobile, higher intent openings are happening on mobile. As we're seeing that shift in behaviors, we're seeing more numbers go to mobile, we would expect that that conversion rate would be going up. And as we're seeing more of that share come away from desktop, we would see those going down a little bit. So what I would say is this is certainly not anything that we would do to change maybe our strategy on desktop unless we're, testing some other cool elements to optimize for conversion, but certainly this means that we need to be paying more attention to mobile. So I would see that more as an indicator that mobile is on the rise and is continuing to rise year over year, just for brands who aren't necessarily putting as much resources into making sure that your mobile is kind of top notch.
Thanks for clarifying, Amy. And then this question is from Daphne. Here's kind of a set of questions. So she has an e-commerce store with physical products. She's looking for some insight on how she should send her emails with pictures. Would you say a text-only email would work better for e-commerce stores? She's read that only writing text-only to customers, like you would write to a friend, tends to perform better. And then with that, also the issue of picture-heavy emails tends to go to promo tab in Gmail. What would you suggest for this?
I can answer that. So I would recommend if you display your products, there should be a nice balance between, you can still use images, just make sure that you're adding titles using text, what the product is itself. And then again, just making sure that you're adding alt text on the images as well, because email clients such as Gmail really do appreciate that you're sending out relevant content. So with an image, they can't really tell what kind of, what the content is about. So that's where alt text actually helps. But what you're referring to, I think, Daphne, is plain text email. So essentially it looks like it's an email written between you and I. It's much more personal. And just going back to kind of one of Amy's best practices of having at least one CTA, what's great about plain text emails is that you really do want to limit the amount of CTAs within an email, because that way it's less distracting and you're only giving them kind of a one-way to click through. So if you have a landing page with just one page with all of your products or one new collection, that's where I think it would be helpful to do a plain text email to just make it a little bit more personal. And then as for, all images going to your promo tab, unfortunately, that's typically expected because they see that as more of a marketing email, which makes sense. So it would add you to that bucket. But what you could try and incorporate is just more text about the product. Start sending out campaigns and newsletters that are maybe more informational based. So how they would use your product, product reviews from your customers. So less sales focused and more just information about the company and product itself.
Cool. And can I piggyback on that too with just a couple quick items?
Yeah.
So as far as like plain text emails, I have tested this extensively with other brands before, and it is good to use sparingly if you want to put a mix in with some of your HTML emails, because sometimes you do see a little bit higher engagement because it's something different. However, it's important not to lean into that too heavily, because eventually we tend to see a higher unsubscribe rate happening because it's, contacts start to feel like, hey, this isn't really genuine communication. It's maybe a little bit misleading. So if you want to use them every once in a while, totally great to kind of augment your email program, but just don't rely on them too heavily. And then as far as the Gmail promo tab, there was huge fear among email marketers when that was rolled out. But what we've seen is like people actually want to know, people go into that promo tab. They want to engage with the brands that they've subscribed to, and they like having everything there to be able to jump into that tab and look and grab which brands they want to interact with. So we didn't actually see a decline happening once they launched that promo tab, which was really surprising to everyone. And then now, again, like when we were talking about like the annotations and things, there's a lot of cool things you can do now to make sure you stand out even more in that promo tab.
Great, thanks ladies. And we're actually coming to the end of our time here, and I don't want to keep anyone over. So with that, is there any kind of last minute takeaways that either of you would like to add before I bring us to a close here?
Nope. Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks everyone. So with that, I did just want to go ahead and let everyone know of our July webinar calendar that's coming out. So with July 9th, we have our California Consumer Privacy Act Countdown to Compliance. This is pretty critical for a lot of people that compile personal data, and the effective date is going to be January 2020. So it's only 6 months away. Would highly recommend that people stay tuned on that one. After that, we have how the best beauty brands find success on Amazon coming up the week after. Amplifying influencer marketing on the 23rd, and then with the last one, using lifetime value data to optimize your paid media strategy. So if anyone's interested in those are events coming up for webinars. Other than that, thanks for taking the time to join us today. We'll be sending out the recordings within the next 24 hours, so keep an eye out in your inbox for that. This is Persephone signing off from downtown San Diego, and see you next time, everyone. Thanks, Sammy. Thanks, Amy.